Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay in the back? Is it too loud? Seems okay. Um, Before I say anything else, can we just acknowledge how wonderful it is there with Brandon Sum here to read us some poems? I think Brandon and I started talking about this event almost, I think, 2 years ago. So it's been a long time coming, and it's really wonderful to have him here on campus and at long last. So last March, just a few weeks into Trump's second term, Brandon gave a reading at Amherst College in which he mentioned, just as an aside, but with appropriate incredulity, that it was hard to imagine that simply saying the name of a place, the Gulf of Mexico, had become a political act. Now, nearly a year later, how much worse things have become. And in this time of true crisis, in which reckless cruelty and brazen racism have become matters of policy, and when language is not just debased on a daily basis, but actively used as a weaponized means of oppression, I am really thankful that we're able to come together and hear poems that, among so many other things, interrogate our acts of naming and underscore the importance of family and inheritance and community. So Brandon, again, welcome. So here's how tonight will work. Yona Harvey will be introducing Brandon tonight. And following the reading, the two of them will be up here in conversation. And then following that discussion, Brandon will be over here at the purple tablecloth signing books. And I say this every time, and I mean it every time. If you want to come up and just say hello to Brandon, that does not require the price of a book. So, just come up and say hello and ask a question you want to ask, and Brandon would be really happy to talk to anyone. And then I would definitely want to offer some thanks for the many folks who made tonight possible. So as we kick off this season, I want to thank all of our many alums and donors, as well as the Boutelle-Day Foundation, for their ongoing support of the Boutelle-Day Poetry Center. Their generous contributions and donations are what make this programming possible. And I want to thank our many co-sponsors for tonight's event here on campus. So that would include American Studies, the Department of East Asian Language and Cultures, English Language and Literature, the program in Latin American and Latina Studies, the Translation Studies concentration, and then the programming in World Lit. I also want to thank Jeff so much for being here tonight to ensure that our live stream goes out to everyone who's joining us online. Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Jeff. I want to thank our Northampton's own bookstore, Broadside Books, and especially Roz from Broadsides, who is, you may have passed coming inside. This beautiful book is available out in the atrium. Please, if at all possible, I cannot recommend Tripas enough. Please stop by, pick up a copy, do yourself a favor, and then support our wonderful independent bookstore, our hometown heroes. I want to let everyone know that on February 24th, so 2 weeks from tonight, we'll be hosting acclaimed poet Jenny Brown here on campus. Jenny Brown, AKA Smith student Lyda Martin's mom, will be reading right here in Weinstein from her really beautiful new collection. And that event will also begin at 7 o'clock. So in my English 112 students, this will be the first night of doing an event involving the QR codes for attendance. So toward the end of the evening, those QR codes will be posted at the doors on the sides, probably one here and probably one back by the back table. So just make sure you scan the QR codes before you leave here this evening. I want to thank all of you again just for being here. It feels really wonderful to come together tonight and hear Brandon's poetry. And now it is my true pleasure to introduce Yona Harvey. Oh, already applause for Yona Harvey. Yona Harvey, as given your applause, I think you likely know, is the author of You Do Not Have to Go to Mars for Love, which was the winner of the Believer Book Award in Poetry, and Hemming the Water, winner of the Kate Tufts Discovery Award from Claremont Graduate University. Between the publication of her first two poetry books, Harvey co-wrote Marvel Comics' World of Wakanda. I hope some of you have checked that out. It earned an Eisner Award for Best Limited Series, and she also co-wrote the comic book series Black Panther and Crew, becoming the first Black woman to ever write for the character of Storm. Her third poetry collection is forthcoming in September 2026. Her writing has appeared in numerous publications, including Obsidian, Literature and Arts in the African Diaspora, Best American Poetry, Letters to the Future, Black Women, Radical Writing, and A Poet's Craft, a comprehensive guide to making and sharing your poetry. Yona is the recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship, a Japan Creative Artist Fellowship, the Heinz Foundation's Carol Brown Award, and the inaugural Lucille Clifton Legacy Award from St. Mary's College of Maryland. She is brilliant. She's a rock star. She's the Tamas Day Professor of Poetry here at Smith, and I count myself so incredibly lucky to call her a colleague and a friend. Please welcome Yona Harvey.
Thank you, Matt Donovan. I count myself lucky as well. All right, I am thrilled to introduce Brandon Sohm to the Smith community this evening. When I consider his two poetry collections, The Tribute Horse, which won the Kate Tufts Discovery Award, and Tripas, which won the 2024 Pulitzer Prize in Poetry, I think first of his tender, targeted, and complex scrutiny of language, of what the poet Safia El-Hillo coined translationese. Translationese, El-Hillo has said, reflects a shared, improvised collision of words and sounds and meaning-making among immigrant families and communities, among family and social gatherings, dining tables, workspaces, and of course, across diasporas. There's an intense musicality in Sohm's poems and a reconsideration of what it means for a poem, and by association, words and language, to sing. That said, his work moves beyond the surface of pleasurable lyricism, expanding the uses of the sonic by revealing the histories, lineages, and people that live beneath and inside the words and syllables, noting the difference between, say, gramophone, record player, song machine, jukebox, radio, body. I'm deeply drawn to Sohm's investigations and see them in direct conversation with Craig Santos Perez, Cecilia Vicuña, Victoria Chang, Mark Nowak, Mai Der Vang, and collectives like She Who Has No Masters, comprised of 13 Asian women writers of the diaspora who collaborate and write of the connections and disconnections between immigrant parents and their American-raised children. Like Sohm, these writers, some of whom he has written about, maybe we'll talk about that later, reflect in their publications an understanding of critical movements, creativity, and essential readings in poetry and literature at large. Sohm's work soars with the multivocality of the Chicano and Chinese ancestries he honors, challenges the racism and blind spots of colonialism, noting that, quote, for a colonized people, language, even in prose, is never straightforward, end quote. Sohm's writing poses vital questions for both poets and lovers of poetry, invites us to consider how language might sound resistance, which feels right on time for this now moment. He describes the poetic line as something that both breaks and connects. These perspectives advance conversations about art, education, our rights as artists and everyday people, quite frankly, to address issues of diversity, appropriation, and who determines the criteria that makes poems or even, again, everyday people successful or complete. Today, I want to shout out Soam's open-minded reach, the way he draws from sources in the African diaspora as well as in the Asian diaspora, Greek mythology, historical labor resistances that help him unpack, for instance, his Chicana grandmother's work for Motorola. I'm shouting out the fluidity and authority with which Soam writes in and about mixed company and even mixed lineages as an impactful, necessary, artistic, defiant, and at the same time, commonplace act. Brandon Soam has twice been a writing fellow at the Provincetown Fine Arts Work Center. His articles and poems have been published in Hayden's Ferry Review, the Academy of American Poets, Paris Review, and many, many places. He teaches at the University of California, San Diego, and in these turbulent times, he is an essential poet to have in our midst. Brandon, I am so grateful for your voice and the voices inside it. Please give it up for Brandon.
I just got introduced by Yona Harvey, you all. I might need to take a moment because I am deeply moved by that consideration and reading of my work. Thank you, Yona. Thank you. Wow. All right. Thanks for allowing me to collect myself after such a wonderful introduction. So I'm just going to keep the gratitude going here because I am just filled with so much gratitude to be here. Huge thanks, first of all, to all of you for coming out and braving the cold and being here to hear some poems. Thanks so much. Huge gratitude to the Poetry Center and to Smith, to Matt and to Jen for just being such thoughtful hosts and taking such good care of me. It's been an amazing visit. Huge thanks to Professor Parrish and Professor Harvey and their classes, which I got to visit and be in conversation with some of the wonderful poets that are with us tonight. Your questions, your conversation, your reading of my work has just filled me with so much gratitude and so much thanks. And so thank you. Thank you very much. It means the world to me. So yeah, as been said, I just to further introduce myself, I am a Chicano and Chinese American. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, immersed in and living between the cultures, the languages, the working class labor that defined my family. After my parents divorced when I was 2, my mother cared for me with the help of my Chicana grandmother, who, as Professor Harvey mentioned, worked for Motorola for 30 years on the a factory line inspecting semiconductors. On the weekends, I went to work with my father and Chinese grandparents at our family corner store. So this book, Tripas, that I'm reading to you from, traces in verse lines that mixed identity, that mixed heritage, those mixed communities. And it's an identity that is deeply connected and contingent upon other intersecting lines, family lines, factory lines, and border lines. As I read tonight these poems about family and about labor and about migration, I want to center our communities, our families being torn apart by the terror and violence of mass deportations, family separation, ICE raids, and ICE shootings. It's my hope that these poems and tripas be read as a counter-narrative to these violent acts, a counter-narrative that celebrates the indispensable intimacy and interconnectedness of our queer, immigrant, multicultural, multilingual, and transnational lives. I'm going to start off with a poem that's set in a corner store, but not in Phoenix. A corner store that's actually in Mexico City. It's a corner store called Supermercado Li Hao. And it's a store that I was in, and as I was looking at the things for sale in the store that were in Spanish, right? I thought of my own grandmother and my own experience growing up in a store. The poem also presents or references deportations within this country happening in the 30s, and then also deportations happening in Mexico, history of anti-Chino violence, anti-Chinese violence and deportations in states in Mexico like Sinaloa and Sonora. Supermercado Li Hao. Amid the aisles of fideo, de huevo, de arroz, hongo negro, shiitake, cristanemo, pétalo de lily, and clavo chino. I remembered how her apron pockets kept a box cutter, how she bagged Mad Dog and Wild Turkey, or wrapped precisely like a gift a pig's foot in wax paper. In the Efe on Dolores Street, in Barrio Chino, south of South Phoenix, Chinese grocers, immigrants unassimilable to the mixing in mestizaje, sell spices and ingredients. Curios, too, palillos chinos, ceramic conejos, dragones de oro, like those in Borges' compendium of imagined beasts, saddled by kings, the main course of emperors, and beside them were sobre rojos, the lai she wrote my Chinese name on, with a gong hei fat choi slipping inside good luck money. With hands that punched at a register, one-fingered, like planting seed in soil, those sheer hands with barrettes or earwigs pulled from a day's lettuce. She wrote the strokes that mirrored the thinness of hand bones. I didn't know the characters, or luck brought with their slice and sweep the spines of their first made marks. On envelopes in ballpoint, the name I couldn't sign but signed me marked moon phased and moon based New Year in script that stayed ellipses and recorded the paid before I knew the received. On market signs in Sharpie and Spanish, naming the products of China. We might read stevedores on galleons, coolies of empire, how the Chinese came for centuries to Big Lusong. Their descendants sold sundries in the 1930s in the copper towns of Sonora before they were run out by ordinance, by anti-Chino violence. The same years, under Hoover and so-called repatriation, federal and state agents searched payrolls for Mexican-sounding names, executing large-scale raids that deported over 1 million Mexican and Mexican Americans. Could I sign my name, that crossing, that chiasmus of exile, or simply share a night's receipts, its archives of salditos, pack of palmals, tins of potted meat? An IOU and salt's cure, the longhand she learned in a village schoolhouse. Long, they say, for long life, long as glass noodles, keeps sound and stores meaning, writing in the margins or corners, those tienditas de la esquina, where paths meet or not, like cut rope, or twist like those figures of dragons. Inscrutable, Borges writes, of their infinite shapes, and yet goes on with details about claws, horns, and scales, their large horse-like heads and snaking tail, the medicinal uses of their teeth, how they keep a pearl chained to their necks, and broil whole shoals of fish with one breath, how one moves like a river rising from earth, its backbone bristling with spines. Thank you. Chino. The olla knocked with steam. The masa cooked. She said her eyes are china. The vowel switched on an aura, a shine that sheens the threshold. The vowel was spell, an eye that might we, an eye that echoes how we're seen and see. Identity. Ay Dios, she exclaimed, surrounded by photos, niños and nietos, where I'm the only chino. How might I see through my family's eyes, an owl's eyes in ojos, and one in its lid turned sideways, mu? I wondered with her at the table where we placed one olive, ojo negro, in each hoja, that worn folio for field corn's field notes. What does that dark eye in the ear's husk see? Amber Ortega and Nelly Jo David are indigenous activists. And a while back, they peacefully obstructed the building of the border wall by sitting in the front end loader of construction trucks. This was south of Tucson, there in the borderlands in Cuito Springs. And this poem tries to amplify their work, and it begins with a epigraph from Nelly Jo David. I just felt like he was fighting us with his machine. Resistors. In Guadalajara, to see where Motorola took the line my grandmother worked on. I can't find the site, but spend the days in naves of a deconsecrated church, looking up at frescoes de Rosco. Here is a horse, a toe chain for tail, train piston for hock and hoof. Over murdered Mexica, Cortez stands, lug nut hips and kneecaps, gauntleted hand at the sword hilt, silver as a knot of solder. Opposite him, the Franciscan and his Latin cross, miter-sawn angles hewn down to dagger point, and an angel in assembly line armor lifting a bloodied banner with the stenciled letters of an alphabet, the one I must have started learning, sing-song in the pitch and timbre of milk teeth at 48th and Willera, a one-bedroom duplex west of Papago's greasewood and buttes of sandstone, and a block down from the Motorola, where my grandmother punched in nights to look after a conveyor of semiconductors, those nascent, ancient rotaries strung up to starlight and empire, gaslighting like that gas painting of progress and whiteness, wrapped in telegraph wire, lithe and looping as a cake shop box string. No wall on O'odham land. I hear the woman today protests from the bucket of a front-end loader, a caterpillar, her presence dumbstruck on treadwheels tall as vault doors, its maw metal hollow, a confessional or old Mountain Bell phone booth she stepped into amid the felled saguaro and ribs of organ pipe. Her body, where dirt goes, says her body is the land the wall wants to eat. I stream this, download by data plan, by bandwidth, from the cloud servers deep in their grid deserts to the crystalline and rare earth minerals, making my cell phone black box theater, making her code, making her algorithm, both soprano and Mario Savio. The solder seemingly quantum leap from soldada and solidarity. Still, I remember the ram's horn baritone in my nana's King James. Imagine her driving those years with riders to shepherd the sound through solid state and know the harder truth. The defiant mic this woman makes resonates with her body within the digger's teeth. Thanks so much. Thanks, y'all. I might change it up a little bit. I was so grateful again to my hosts here and to Matt. And Matt took me over to the museum here today. And I saw such wonderful works there. It's an amazing museum, and it was great to be there this afternoon. And there's a Mexican modernist photographer named Lola Alvarez Bravo, and one of her photo montages where she was montaging images from photographs that she had taken was there on the wall. So I wanted to read this poem in connection with her work there at the museum. The title takes my title takes the title of her photo montage called Sirenas del Aire, 1958. I am sitting with mermaids of the air, their fishtails from a monger's stall, where they were lifted from ice bed to butcher's block and wrapped in newsprint. Now they type. Over carriage and keys, these two sirens and their Olivetti. I imagine the photographer reading Homer and considering how, in both inspiration and temptation, we encounter a beseeching, or thinking that the mermaids, with their knowledge of tides and the late summer's phosphorescence, might say something about the startling beauty of betweenness. My father, born in 51 in Phoenix, once found with me on the dim sum's placemat our rabbit sign. Jack Rabbit, I think now, so called for its long ears similar to a pack donkey, scrubland critter beneath prickly pear, a sage eater preyed upon by hawk and harvester in the sod and cotton fields outside Avondale, where my father kept his shop. Then the char siu came, sliced with its red edges like a kiss on a napkin. I knew, of course, La Sirena on the loteria that Nana called from the deck. With dried beans for markers, we listened on the edge of bingo. Afterward, we gathered each bean to cook with garlic and salt, maybe a piece of saved fat that simmered as we slept until morning when Nana would be returning from third shift. Homer never describes the sirens as sexy. At other times in history, they are part bird and not fish at all. Euripides lists them as servants of Persephone, crossing between this world and the next. The montage leaps with modernism's mixing of perspectives, empire's far-flung violence and fragmentation. Some say bingo echoes a Cantonese word that asks who, asks which person. If Googled, Sirenas de Aire shows us ads for air raid sirens. Can you see my string of beans, its rosary of call and response over images, so suddenly, so briefly, all in a row? My primo, my cousin, Alejandro, he also went by Alex. He was a breakdancer. And when we were kids, when he would breakdance, in a circle and compete with others, He had this move. It was this kind of like, it was like this his kind of like last move. Like it was a move that was kind of like, you know, you can't touch this, right? And what the move was that he would lift up his shirt and make his stomach wave. Right? How do you compete with that? Right? Everyone just would go home, you know. Cipher. Breaking. My cousin Alex made his belly wave in series by force, like gravity. Made a C on his stomach, rip curl, made a moon over his breaking boy's body. A Phoenix kid, he was waves in a desert like dunes wave out west on 8 past Yuma, or like the screen waves on the machines his mom, Chita, monitored for Motorola. His was all stomach, his panza formed like that word from morning's sweet rolls. He would lift his shirt to show the circle, to say step off, to throw shade or gauntlet, to lay down the law or say can't touch this with his walk-off swan song, his ace, his go-to. He'd lift his shirt like elders do for a breeze on lunch breaks, to let skin in day's heat breathe and let their gut rest, let gut go, be full, round, or at home, once a workday's done, cold can on gut's curve its crest, to let the can sweat there now instead of them. Indeed, he'd dance where they sometimes drank, VFWs or legions, in veteran places where first communions or quinceañeras happen. They would robot, centipede, helicopter, moonwalk, as if those moves were earth science classes. In fact, his stomach translated, transduced, his textbook told him, the DJ'd sound, sounds wave made flesh, sound incarnate, on a belly where shipmates might tattoo, turning needles from their scrimshaw. His stomach was canvas to sign and cosign. Rise over run he might have graphed on a TI-81, the way they sign whale song. A verse, flesh scrolled, a phone's text before phones rolled like that. There we stood, cousins, some dressed for catechism to receive sacrament. Our awes made moons on our faces as he popped and locked his gold chain with the crucifix safely in his lips while he lifted his shirt simple-like, as if undressing for bed. This is called Shainadas, and it has an epigraph from the Chicano poet and artist Jose Montoya, and the epigraph reads, Ese Louis, chale, call me diamonds, man. Shainadas. It's about my mom's dad, my tata. Tata shined shoes as a boy for movie money, and I imagined how a shine box might fit under the theater seat, the way it fits decades later when I saw it in that dark beneath my grandparents' old, sunken spring bed. Later bulldozed, the Phoenix Theater must have looked like those pre-war cinemas, mostly lost now, but documented in the photographs of Hiroshi Sugimoto, for which the artist placed his large format camera in the last rows of spring-shut seats below ornate wall carvings and Baroque sconces, where he then left the camera's aperture open for a full feature. It is what we see of stars, all endings and untouchable beginnings, images, characters, and plot gone, and only white light left. The cedar box housing brushes, rags, and tins of polish had its hinged latch and the handle that also cradled a shoe. My foot's never touched it, but I wonder which brush inside might brush back against the grain one of those photos to extend the wet finger of projection over a boy who looks up toward the screen like he looked up from a shine. Or is the figure to borrow from that other invention? Could I carve open a pinhole in the shine box for its storehouse of inverted images? As if revolutions were that simple an apparatus of optics, to have the shiner ascend there to what shines. I spoke about this poem in Professor Parrish's class yesterday, and I thought I would read it. And I'll share what I share to introduce the poem and that we talked about yesterday in class. My mother wanted to name me Brian. My father said, "What about Brandon?" So I'm Brandon. Hi. My Chinese grandmother, my father's mother, transliterated my name and gave me a Chinese name, and it sounded like Bendon, and she put an "ah" on the end. Bendon ah. And so this poem celebrates that "ah" sound. It's called Inventory, and it takes place in the corner store that I grew up in. The "ah" was more song, and she sang beyond the name. If the name were river, the "ah" flooded its banks. Nonetheless, in its song, the "ah" signed the air, made the air mean. The "ah" hitched and hinged its intimacy. Jaw dropped, it crooned its diminutive, sang of class, filling a back kitchen at lunch where a wok clangs and a knife trims the gristle. In the stockroom with her, it kept accounts, was ledger, an idea of order among Schlitz and Old Milwaukee. From tones in the pharynx, from lungs that hung like two clipboards, came the "ah's" inventory. She tied the "ah" to my name, like that old trick tongue-tying cherry stem. Quipu or rosary, in the knot was knowing. She threaded the "I" to sew a threnody, liturgy, the way she sang the vowel amid the till bell, a field song over produce, a na, a nope, or uh-oh. It was abracadabra, an end note, a colophon bearing the binder's mark. It lingered incarnate in the cold walk-in, or ghosted the stocked aisles where I stood over cans of Ajax and Green Giant. The "ah" was wavelength, a frequency shape, like a mountain range. It was the gesture's aura, and like a varnish, it lustered my name and diminished like a mark in the margin. It was Whistle House, a star's spur, and it could scold from the meat counter where she priced the chuck with a grease pen tied to the scale. In her long breath, the awe was money to burn, incense in a Folger's can. In the ear, as if in a mirror, I found myself listening, and like all language, it was a grave's treats, singing of separateness and tracing something complete. Though not on a map, its lilt echoed the geographies, and she hummed it, simply over a thin broth, simmered day long, and suckled on a short rib. And I'll just read one more poem. Yeah? I didn't keep track of time. I'm sorry. Does one sound good? How about two? Two, okay. There was such silence. I was like, am I letting you down or you really want to go? You can be honest. Okay, I had so many great conversations, so forgive me, but I know we were talking about Pauline Oliveras earlier. So here's a poem where Pauline Oliveras, this really extraordinary experimental musician and composer, who played accordion and taught at where I am currently teaching. My partner and I currently teach at UC San Diego. It's a poem that also begins with a film by Cocteau, a film called Orpheus. And I was revising this at Matt and Legis' house when we were dog sitting the marvelous Gloria. Lots of connections. Antenna. Tuning not lute but car radio. Cocteau's Orpheus copies the broadcasts from a netherworld for verses. His muse, a circuitry my grandmother inspected nights at Motorola. Before her shift, she put me to bed, laid down beside me and smoked parliaments. Lost it. I thought the mic was trying to give me notes, like step it up or, or get with the rhythm. I'll start again. Antenna. Tuning not lute but car radio. Cocteau's Orpheus copies the broadcasts from another world for verses. His muse, a circuitry my grandmother inspected nights at Motorola. Before her shift, she put me to bed, lay down beside me, and smoked parliaments, each dragged like tower light to planes overhead. From crest to crest is wavelength and frequency, the number per second. Where the waves won't reach, we call shadow. Count the radio's components like prosody. diodes, triodes, tetrodes, and dialed the frequency in meters. Jack Spicer cited quasars, quasi-stellar radio traveling light years, as possible sources. I remember Orion, one slick matador, Theo called him, up on South Mountain, leaning on towers, red-eyed with warning, and somehow, by frequency, by transmissions I vaguely knew, drunk with music. With ham operator, Pauline Oliveros sent a hello to the moon's tympanum. It bounced back, dropped in pitch by Doppler effect, and she accompanied the sound on accordion. A nana is lullaby, cradle song. I tell my mom, a nana now. And we talk about how neither of us had heard that before. Canción de cuna, the lacuna we hum and tune by, its tonic note, a chord knot we worry and teethe on with night song. One grandmother with Vicks, one with Tiger Balm, rubbed fires of camphor and mint, old poultices into my chest, their palms kneading and wet with salve, its menthols, to strip the chaff and rattle in a night wheeze. Can you hear their lullabies? One like the dicho chiquito pero picoso, one in all 5 tones of village dialect. With wish hum for thresholds, they put to bed each name for the night. In Cocteau's version, Orpheus crosses over through a tailor's mirror. The carnival house optics of Marx's commodity fetish, I thought. Or my father in Phoenix, stalking the reach-in with old Milwaukee and seeing in the glass a brief moment his own reflection. Aigu tells me great-grandfather frequented Chinatown fortune tellers, ones with charts and calendars, a crystal ball almanac for a paper sun on a paper path, a celestial divination in the back room of butcher or herbal shop or corner store like our own, where the till bell drifted back to find Yang Yang her walk kicking spark off stove flame, or find me at a desk, my father fashioned from Schlitz 12-packs for weekends homework. Me copying out my name, a dotted line running through its center, and not knowing the silences, not knowing then the cost of turning back to see. In today's news, U.S. troops install the miles of border razor wire, so-called concertina for the coil that extends and flattens like the bellows of a squeeze box. Listen to everything all the time and remind yourself when you're not listening, instructed Oliveros, a composer of sonospherics and a Qi Gong student of quantum physics. In practicing, she once explained, I've experienced listening with the palms of my hand. Thanks, y'all. This is my last poem, and it begins with another artist who's here in your museum, actually, the great muralist Judy Vaca. Transmitter. In Judy Vaca's mural, The Great Wall, a Chichimeca woman on a comet tail of field corn hovers and whispers in the ear of Edison, the Zacatecan, the secrets of the light bulb. Orale, my mom texts, but autocorrect sends Oracle instead. I remember as a kid looking up from the passenger seat at the work badge my grandmother, after each shift, clipped to the rearview mirror's wood bead rosary, a dashboard milagro in the dial light of her Chevy, its tooth clasp bit into the Hail Marys as if to test the solder of that circuitry. She often tells me of Mexican movie stars, Maria Felix, Jorge Negrete, Pedro Infante, how they toured the U.S. movie houses and signed the ticket stubs she sold from a box office skinny as a phone booth. A transmitter made from gold beater's skin stretched across a hoop drum. Bell's phonograph used pig bristle for a stylus to sign his speech waves on a plate of smoke glass. I watched on YouTube Infante stand with 11 mariachis, gallant in silk ties and epaulets, to serenade Paloma, his tenor crooning about the unrequited man turned dove with grief, to the actress in bedclothes, and bewitched, as I imagine, Helmholtz, the pianist, holding a tuning fork to an electromagnet. Trying to picture that man wasting away in heartache and so hollowed to bird bones, I reread this morning Socrates telling Phaedrus outside the city walls of cicadas how they were men before muses brought them song. Unaware that cost, I climbed mesquite limbs for the discarded skins, brittle as chicharrones, and cupped their matchlight in my boy hands. Hearing, it said, is touched at a distance. Ola is amp and trough. Frequency equals waves passing a given point. My nana's voice is creosote and parliaments, tenor and rasp that sidewinds cell towers over chevrons of Ocotillo through Ironwood and Arroyo, moving in the megahertz her hands made. Thanks. This is yours.
Great. All yours.
That was an incredible reading. I was sitting there thinking, thank you. Yeah, go for it. You have the long form poem down. Like, wow. I mean, we poets, we could get into a lot of trouble with that, but I feel like with yours, it's like, I don't want it to be over. So I'm just sitting there thinking about how you're making it work. I mean, I don't know, that's just something I'll think about in 2026. I mean, you're a killer storyteller, but it's more than that. It's like the cataloging and the family history, the pacing, the moving in and out. I don't have it totally figured out, but I was just down there trying to unpack all of that. It's mesmerizing. It's beautiful. So thank you.
Oh, that's super kind, and yeah, coming from you, I'm very grateful. Thank you for that. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think earlier we were talking with students in your class about bringing, the full complexity of ourselves to our poems and to the writing page, and I think that for many of us who are of mixed heritage and identity, for those of us who are part of a diaspora, um, um, it it takes a moment for us to articulate, who we are, who our communities are, to talk about the various ruptures of diaspora, and to make the connections that are necessary to, I always like talking about how articulation at the etymology of that word is about putting parts together.
Yeah.
And I feel like a poem is a place where I'm putting my parts together. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the evolution of your comfort in that realm? I feel like we are in a space and place where, of course, everything is fast and rapid. It's almost a cliche to say it at this point, but to make poems and to read poems that slow down, that take their time, not only in the way that you write them and the way that you read them, but maybe the way that you think about them before they even get made. Like, what can you say about that?
Yeah, I think that I love that question. Thank you. Several things are coming to my mind. I feel sometimes like I talk slow, and I think that sometimes frustrates my partner. I think it takes me a while to put things together. I think am conscious of trying to slow things down. I mean, how do you do that, though, right? That's a great question. I feel like my sense of time is so different now. I think after COVID and the pandemic, I think about being a parent of a 5-year-old. Like, yeah, it's just moving so fast now. I think about this current moment we're living in, this deep crisis that we're in. I think about the overwhelming, onslaught of news and atrocity and cruelty happening on a daily basis. It's hard to make room for poetry and for reflection, to slow things down. But as Audre Lorde said, poetry is not a luxury. We need that space of reflection. We need that space to come up with the names of what feels unnameable, right? We need that space of reflection to slow down and make the connections that might make us whole again. Yeah.
In that regard, you said earlier today when we met with one of the classes, you grew up in a borderland, you live in a borderland, and you feel lucky to be in a borderland. And I was like, as soon as you said that, I was like, I'm definitely going to ask you about that later. The lucky part, just to have you talk about it a little bit more, the luck of that, especially given, we're in a time where oppressive forces want us to think of borderlands as unlucky or so I just wanted to know what was on your mind when you think about that, when you said that.
Yeah, I currently live in San Diego, which I see and many others see as a kind of trans-Pacific borderlands, right? There on the Pacific Ocean, which is that Trans-Pacific crossing is part of my heritage. And my father's parents, my grandparents on my father's side, came from Guangdong, the southern part of China. And then, we're there at the U.S.-Mexican border, and as we often say, we didn't cross the border, but the border crossed us, right? And this is, this is my community, this is my home, and I do feel very lucky to be there because of that confluence of community, of language, and a confluence of identities. To be in the San Diego, Tijuana region, and it's just a rich history, and the language there is so full of life and possibilities. I would say that for both of my families, the languages are a kind of poetry, right? That comes out of migration. It comes out of a mixture of cultures. It comes out of work and migration. My Chinese grandparents spoke a dialect of Chinese, what might be called a Taishanese or Hoi Ping Hua. It is not a kind of standardized Mandarin or official language of Mandarin, right? And then our Spanish, our border Spanish, is this mixture of, like we are, of indigenous, of Spanish, of English, right? And so that mixture is extraordinary, and I'm so grateful for both Asian American poetry and also Latinx and Chicanx poetry, and there's just a lot of Chicano poet, like I mentioned, Jose Montoya, who was doing a lot of translingual play, both in his artwork and his poetry. I think about Juan Felipe Herrera, who has this great, in his book, The Notebooks of Chile Verde, Smuggler, he has this great kind of catalog or list of Chicano-made words. And I recently got to sit down with my grandmother, my Nana Pastora, who's now she's about to turn 94 in July, and I read this list in the poem. We read the poem together, and she was able to, oh, he's talking about this, or he's talking about that, or and just that being able to celebrate, which, as you pointed out, celebrate what is often denigrated, which is often put down. It's an absolute beautiful and vibrant place and community and culture to be a part of. Yeah.
I love the coding in that too. Like some folks would think that they're looking down on us, but they're completely missing the play, the coding. I was going to ask you about code switches. Well, you have a poem literally called Code Switches. You've kind of answered this question a little bit already. And we know like code switching comes to us literally from coding, switching the language, especially like in many cases for survival and safety, but also like wink, wink for our own entertainment, and conversations with one another. So I was just going to ask you if you wanted to say a little bit more about how code switching factors into your work, the poems that you make.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, ultimately, I love language. As a poet, I love language.
You don't say.
Yeah, right? Surprise. I love language and the possibility of language. And I think that, I think when I started out writing, my experience with my heritage language is, is this, that I grew up speaking primarily English. I grew up monolingually, being raised by my mother, but hearing Spanish at my mom's parents' house. They were largely speaking to each other in Spanish. And my tias and tios and my mom grew up speaking Spanish, but by the time I came along, they weren't really speaking Spanish anymore. And then I grew up hearing, as I said, my Chinese grandparents speaking to my father in Hoi Pinghua or Toi Chinese. And I had this experience where I was in their kitchens and in the grocery store that we worked in, and I didn't know what they were saying, right? But I had obviously an emotional attachment to what they were saying, and I could sense, the tones. I could sense the inflections. I can sense, whether they were happy or they were sad. And I was feel like that I was at a young age immersed in the music of my communities. And I feel like in the poetry I'm making, I'm trying to celebrate that music. But there's a lot of anxiety too, because I currently I take Spanish classes on Sunday on Zoom, and I try to pick up what Chinese I can from my agu, my aunt. But ultimately, I'm what we say in Mexican American culture. I'm a pocho, right? They gave the Pulitzer Prize to a pocho, which is pretty crazy, right? It's like, whoa, wait a minute. Pocho is this like someone who was raised separate from their community, their language, right? And so I'm trying to kind of overcome that anxiety or that feeling kind of at a loss or a lack of efficiency, and I'm trying to feel through my poetry that maybe I'm enough, And I feel like investing in poems and the music of poetry has been about that work. But what's been really amazing is the music has help me to reconnect to those communities and to celebrate those communities, to amplify those communities when so many of our communities are under threat, right? Yeah.
What kind of music do you listen to, and how does that music and other arts, I mean, definitely visual art comes up a lot, design, whatever, influence how you write your poems and connect with your son? Now that you have a 5-year-old, like what's that relationship like in terms of language too?
Yeah, I'm kind of the DJ at our house. I'm always putting music on, and I don't know if this is like stereotypical parent but I have this sense of like we're going to listen to really good music and you're going to be immersed in it, and it's going to be diverse, and it's going to be, so yeah, I'm trying to put on a really great mix, I'm trying to put together a great playlist that he can grow up with, and he can, hear, because he just started public school, and he's actually in a Spanish immersion school, and he's already correcting me on my Spanish, which is fantastic, right? And so, I put on a lot of Spanish language music, and it helps me to kind of connect to what I was hearing at my great-grandmother's house, my grandmother's mom, my Nana Chayo. There was a lot of ranchera music, a lot of norteño music, right? A lot of accordion music, right? So I'm learning about that, and I listen to say alt Latino podcast, right? And thinking about the amazing halftime show on Sunday. We put on Bad Bunny, right? That's on in our kitchen. But I'm also trying to find Chinese language music that I can put on in the house. We listen to a lot of hip hop. Yeah, a lot of singer songwriter stuff as well too. A lot of folk music, things that maybe my son will ask a question about, and I'll be able to maybe tell a story about that kind of thing. I think music is so important, and I will say, and this is kind of maybe stereotypical parent, proud parent, I do feel like he has already a kind of musical memory. Like he'll hear something and then kind of like hum it back, and I'm like, oh, it's working, it's working. And so yeah, music's so important in our house for sure. Yeah.
No, I have so many things. I've asked this question of other poets, and you touched on it a little bit earlier. But since we're all here, like, what do we gain by being in community? And how is your writing and maybe even yourself shaped or influenced by public engagement? Tell us more about your perceptions of like the writer in the world.
Love that question. Yeah, I think I was talking maybe with your class about just kind of in school being kind of given this idea that like writers are solitary or that poets are solitary, and I really feel that that's not true, and there's a kind of myth around that, and I think community is so important. I'd also say that there's community is a big part of the poems in this book. A lot of these poems are happening in very public spaces, whether it be my grandparents' loud kitchen, or whether it be in our corner store, right? Or on my mom's side, or my grandmother also had a little tiendita, right? So there's all these like public spaces happening. I read about the muralist Judy Vaca, right? So that kind of public-facing, public engagement of muralism is, I'm hoping, coming through the poems as well. So I think, yeah, these poems are very much invested in community, and I think, yeah, poets connecting to community, coming out to readings like this. Thanks again for all you being here. Yeah, it's absolutely vital, especially this moment, right? I mean, I think these spaces. And carving out these spaces that we can all come together and be together and recognize our relationship to each other, right? I feel like what's happening right now is this cruel separation, right? This idea that we can draw these lines, that we can draw these borders, that we can separate our neighbors from each other, right? Being in spaces like this, we recognize how important it is that we be with our community members, be with our neighbors, how interconnected, how intimate we are with each other. Yeah.
I think I'm going to ask this for some of the students, maybe the poetry students. It's around form. So there's a moment in, where's my note about that? There's a moment in your book where, I'm trying to think of the specific poem. Oh, here it is, right? Cuttings. So you have this short sequence, it's in the Tribute Horse book, and there's the poem Cuttings, which has line breaks, the kind of line breaks we would expect to see in a poem or whatever. And then right after that, you have a note on cuttings and then another prose poem. Like, can you talk about the decision around that? I mean, there was just like a little bit of excitement in the brain, like when I first encountered that, when I read that. It's because it's a little bit of a wink and a nod. It's like getting away with a prose poem, but it's not, it's more than that. But I think what I'm getting at is, can you just talk a little bit about prose poems and the difference between maybe the way you see them working versus, like, I don't know, a poem with the breaks?
Absolutely, I'm excited to. Yeah, I'm really interested in the relationship between prose and verse, right? Verse being line breaks and prose being this kind of box-like shape, right? I often, when I'm teaching my introductory class, I often talk about verse lines by giving my students prose to make lines from, right? I think that in some ways, writing in prose alongside verse, for me, helps me remember and remind myself why it is I love verse so much. What is the possibilities of line breaks, right? I'm also interested in a very, old tradition within Asian literature and specifically Japanese literature, the haibun, or kind of poetic journal, poetic diaries, right? Where this practice of writing in prose and then moving into verse and then coming back to prose, right? Or with the haibun, made famous by Basho, writing prose and then attaching or including a short haiku-like poem. I think, working in prose and verse like that is, for me, very, very exciting. I think that, for many of us, prose and a prose passage is what we most encounter, reading our textbooks or reading the newspaper or whatnot. And I feel like prose in the hands of a poet can really disrupt our expectations of what prose does. And so I like that too, to, as you said, kind of wink or say, okay, you think this is prose, but I'm going to throw this at you inside prose and see what you think. Yeah.
Do I still have time for one more? Okay, at least, I hope. I wanted to ask you about the collective, the She Who Has No Masters collective, and just collectives in general. I think it came up earlier talking about like friends, like Stacy Waite, people from our cohorts, like motivating ourselves to write poems, poets forming collectives to get the work done. Is there anything you want to share or say about that? That's not a fully formed question, but I'm really,
great question.
I'm interested in your thoughts on
Yeah.
the poetry collective and accountability.
Yeah, I think it's so vital. Again, I feel like it goes back to this idea, kind of disrupts this notion that the poet, works alone. I absolutely call upon my community and invested in my community of writers where we give each other assignments, where we give each other prompts. Sometimes as I said earlier to your class, sometimes I just need the accountability of like a check mark. Like I'm going to create, like I'll create like a Google folder, and I'll tell my close colleague or friend, I'll say, hey, I'm going to put a poem in there every Friday. Can you just like let me know that you don't have to read it. You just let me know that, you saw it get submitted, and that it's enough to keep me accountable. And it's so vital. The other thing that I'm doing a lot now is I'm writing with community, like on Zoom, right? So I will get on Zoom with 3 or 4 other writers. Sometimes they're poets, sometimes they're academics writing critical prose or research, and we'll just check in, start working. Sometimes we'll do like a 20-minute session, check in, how did it go, and then do like a 45-minute session. But it's amazing. And so, yeah, I would say, yeah, absolutely. Invest in your communities, the communities that you're, already forming within your workshop. Don't let those relationships go. They're absolutely vital. Professor Harvey, Yona, you was just referring to my close friend, Stacy Waite. Stacy was the person I sat down next to right here in workshop the very first day of graduate school, and that was so long ago, and she's still my closest friend. We were just texting before the